Now, to say the very least, I was really worried about the Five Nights at Freddy's movie. Almost all the reviews I saw before going into it were all negative, so I didn't really know if it was going to live up to my expectations. But I tried my best to brush all the worrying aside, and I went to go see the movie in the theater, which funnily enough had a Freddy's restaurant next to it. And I came out thinking it was perfectly fine. In fact, I actually really enjoyed it. Now, it is a very flawed film, but for the most part, I honestly just don't care. Having been a fan of the game since Pizzeria Simulator, I thought it mostly managed to encapsulate the spirit of the games while also being able to create a pretty good story that could still be entertaining to any non-fans. But like I said, this movie is still really flawed, and just because I really like it doesn't mean I like every part of it. So for this review, I decided to go a simpler route. Instead of going over each individual part of the film like I would in past videos, I'll just be splitting this video into two parts: what I liked and what I didn't like. So let's get started. Like I said, I feel like one of the most impressive parts of this film is that they are able to create an original story, but still keep it similar enough to the games to where it has the same basis and spirit, while also being a good standalone story and not confusing. It's honestly impressive they were able to take such a complicated story like FNAF and turn it into a standalone story that also makes sense, but also manages to still feel like a Five Nights at Freddy's movie. The story, despite its flaws, still manages to be enjoyable and well paced, and Mike is a pretty good protagonist. I like seeing how much he cares for his little sister, Abby, to the point where he's literally willing to give up spending time with his brother to save her. The music is pretty good too, although at some points it feels more like a fantasy soundtrack than a scary soundtrack. The opening scene is really cool as well. I always wondered what it would be like to see a night guard actually attempting to escape the building instead of just being stationary like in the games. The suits for the animatronics were very cool, and I thought it was cool to see the FNAF 1 crew back in action. The acting was pretty good, except for Matthew Lillard, but we'll get to that later. The suit design for Spring Bonnie is awesome, and his reveal as he steps out of the shadows and the music swells was probably my favorite part of the film. Also, the reveal that the bodies of the kids were stuffed inside the suits was actually kind of good, even though I already knew since I'm a fan of the games. The ending, which was kind of a mix between the ending to the Silver Eyes and the Fourth Closet, was pretty cool, and seeing William get Springlock was actually chilling, even though it was a little cheesy because of Lilliard's performance. Also, I don't think they could have done a more perfect Matt Pat cameo. I really can't speak for the Corey X Kenshin cameo, though, since I actually barely know anything about him. I'm mostly neutral on the dream sequences with Mike and the kids. At first, they're cool, and then they get a little repetitive, but I decided to put them here since I like them more than I don't. That's all for the things I thought were cool, though, so let's move on to the things I really didn't like. I don't really watch horror movies because I really can't do scary stuff. If I ever do watch a true horror film, I'd probably be hiding behind my non-existent girlfriend the whole time. But for this film, I was willing to make an exception. I mean, I could handle most of the games. As long as it wasn't as absolutely horrifying as FNAF 4, I should be good, right? And it wasn't nearly as horrifying as FNAF 4. In fact, it wasn't scary at all. I think I was scared more the first time I got jump scared by Springtrap in the third game than by this movie, and that's saying something for someone who's easily scared. Which, despite what I just said, was kind of disappointing. You'd think a movie about kids who were murdered and stuffed inside animatronic suits just to haunt them for all eternity would be absolutely horrifying, but it's not. Now, part of this has to do with the fact that most of FNAF's modern audience is children, which resulted in a PG-13 rating. And while I understand that they would want to keep the movie from being too scary for that reason, it still feels a little disappointing. The worst part of the movie by far, though, is towards the middle where the animatronics build a fort with Abby. It's boring, not scary, and it doesn't feel fitting for a movie like this. I mean, I know it's supposed to show us how the animatronics were possessed by children, but it still just feels way out of place. Also, the twist in the end that Vanessa was William's daughter was lame, and I saw it coming from a mile away. And then the reveal that Steve Raglan was William Afton was also lame. Not just because I knew it was coming, because I knew who Matthew Lillard played, but also because there was basically no build-up to it. He had like 4 minutes of screen time in which they made it painfully obvious that he was up to no good, and then he appeared an hour later as William Afton. Also, another big complaint I have about William Afton is Matthew Lilliard's performance. Now, I can't speak for him as a general actor because I haven't watched any of his other works, but he's just not good as Afton in this movie. His voice just doesn't feel like it fits the character, and he makes Afton just feel like an old fat creep instead of the menacing, tragic villain that he is in the first few games. Also, his delivery of "I always come back" was just cringy. With any other delivery, I feel like this line would have made me cheer in theaters, but it just feels so stupid. Now, those are the things I don't like about this film. So now let's head to the synopsis and final rating. Fundamentally, the FNAF movie isn't a really good movie. It's got a lot of problems, mainly towards the middle. Any other film like this would have received a 5 or 6 out of 10, but having been a fan of the game since 2017, I just draw too much enjoyment from this movie to give it a low rating, despite its flaws. So, despite the major things I don't like about this film, I give it an 8 out of 10, just because I enjoy it so much. Because in the end, when it comes to movies, all that really matters was whether or not you had a good time. Thanks for watching. Hey, I'm sorry if this video felt a little rushed. I don't really want to go too in-depth in my reviews like I have in the past. So, this is just kind of an experiment to see if I can make a simpler review and it can still work out. And also, I wanted to get this one out for Halloween. So, yeah. Anyways, have a good week. I'll see you next time.